Welcome to Conversations with Achievers. I'm your host, Robert White. I'm a mentor to owners, executives, and their teams, and CEO of Extraordinary People, LLC. I work with people that want to create extraordinary business performance with less stress, more joy, and more personal fulfillment. So sit back, relax, and prepare to learn from your peers as we explore what it takes in terms of attitudes, habits, and behaviors that achieve extraordinary results. Results for yourself, for your family, and your community. Hello, it's Robert White, and welcome to Conversations with Achievers. It's always good to be with a fellow business person, learn what they've learned, and get a little bit of knowledge about their come from, their state of being, but also their actions as a business person. And today our guest is Matt Murray. Matt, welcome to Conversations with Achievers.
Yes, thanks for having me today. I really appreciate it.
Well, we want to find out a lot more about you. Why don't you do a short version of the life story that brought you to this point in your entrepreneurial role?
Absolutely. So my journey in blue collar started when I was very young. I was born and raised blue collar. My dad was a mechanic and a meat cutter. My mom was a checker and kind of grew up in that industry. I can remember being very young and out in the garage working with dad on stuff. And then as I grew up, I learned to like working on cars and electronics. I was a car stereo installation technician. And then in 97, backing it up a little bit farther, 97, I got into heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, into HVAC. Started off as a technician in Los Angeles, California. And I did that for 6 years. And then the company went bankrupt, and they brought us all in on a Friday in June of 2003 and laid us all off, the whole company. So I was kind of put off onto my own, not by design, but by default. So I went out and found a side job to make some money to pay my house bill. And that side job led to another and another. And a long story short, here I am 20 years later, and I'm still on my summer side job. So, and I now do coaching too. So that's summer side job, 20 years as a blue collar entrepreneur, 8-figure entrepreneur. And I started the Blue Collar King, which is my coaching brand, earlier this year.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, we want to find out more about your company and your coaching.
Yep.
Near the end of this program, but
for sure.
Welcome and thank you for your willingness to participate.
Yep.
Before we got on the air today, we chatted a little bit about Matt recently being visitor to my home state of Colorado, my adopted home state, and some work you're doing on couples retreats. And I think that's also something that many of our listeners are interested in, that subject.
Love it.
In my coaching experience, it usually goes about 3 months where we're talking about profit and dealing with the team and some new tools in that area. Mm-hmm. And then comes the conversation, which is, could you help me a little bit with my adult children, or with my marriage, or something in that more personal area that's pulling us away from effectiveness. So hopefully we'll have a chance to talk about that a bit. Along the way, certainly part of your learning comes from that being grounded in blue collar work, starting with your dad. It's interesting that you knew the place and you knew the subject, and it's obviously a good memory for you. What do blue collar guys know that white collar guys don't?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think, when you look at blue collar versus white collar, I think we as in blue collar, kind of stereotyping myself, people look at white collar people as the people that grew up in the perfect little homes and went to school and went to college and got a college degree and kind of started and came in, at the top of the food chain. And I think blue collar people, we look at ourselves as we had to work our way start off in the trenches and work our way up working on stuff. And then I think some of those blue collar people that started off as technicians, if you will, regardless of what trade it is, they then can move their way up into the higher ranks of an organization, become a supervisor, manager, or director. So I think blue collar people just know a little bit more about the technical stuff. Not that white collar people couldn't learn it as well, but I think it's just how we were raised and how we were brought up. I think blue collar parents raise blue collar children for the most part, and white collar parents raise white collar kids for the most part. I think that's just kind of how society has it all set up.
A good friend of mine was the co-founder of a company called Career Track. At one time, they were the biggest seller of one-day seminars in the world. And how to be a better manager, how to be a better secretary, how to handle time organization, white collar stuff for sure. And he wrote a book. It was a bestseller, because all of those trainers were out promoting it all over the country.
For sure.
And when he wrote and then I did some coaching work with him, and which is the start of our friendship. And he wrote a second book. And the second book, it was just it was just the transcript, all, just typed out. And he sent it to me and I read it. And I honestly responded to him that I'm going to buy copies for all of my children.
Nice.
It's that good. And it was really aimed at the the older teenager, 20s, maybe even early 30s. And one of the pieces of advice he gave was so obviously white collar. He said, go to college and then get a job at a big company, and they'll spend a lot of money training you, and you will learn how to work. And he was very practical about that kind of thing. It's like, okay, you've been in this protected bubble, but get out there and get kicked around a little bit. And then he recommended that they break some rules and get fired.
Nice.
So they could go on and do what they really want to do. And when I read that, I just thought, well, that's just excellent advice. And now the book never got published, and that's a different story for a different time. But Matt, for me, when I look back at my beginnings, because I started kind of early, I started at 8 years old, probably like you with your dad in the garage. Well, my dad wasn't present for things like that, but I cleaned milk cans. I grew up in Wisconsin, the dairy state. And back then they didn't have the big refrigerated tank trucks. The drivers picked up milk cans from the dairy farmers, these small, medium-sized dairy farmers. And they needed to be rinsed before they were sterilized. And that was the driver's job. And I found out that if I did it, I got tipped, right?
Nice.
But I was around people that drove a truck and lugged around those heavy milk cans. And then it was the same thing with picking produce. That you're around people, you're next to somebody often from Mexico that has a life as difficult as in some ways as my childhood was, didn't compare at all to theirs. I learned so much doing that kind of work. One night, and I have to admit, there was some Japanese sake involved with a group of us, and we got into what's the worst job you ever had. And mine was scraping gum off the sidewalk at the local Dairy Queen in midsummer.
Oh yeah, that doesn't sound fun.
But I think about that, and there's a grounding in that kind of work that serves even white collar people, in my experience, especially that learning how to work piece.
Agree.
That what happens if you show up late 2 or 3 days in a row. It isn't a report to the human resource department with blue collar people.
Things are handled a little bit differently.
Somebody's in your face, I would guess.
When you work with a group of guys in the field and you're late on a job, and there's a crane rig, and we're working on a unit or this or that, and you show up late, most standard HR tactics or protocols aren't very effective in that, and aren't used in those types of situations.
You don't have a guidebook either.
Yeah, exactly. I can remember when I started off in '97 in the trade, and it was a union. I showed up on the first day, a bunch of union pipe fitters. I mean, these guys were burly, big guys, tattooed. I mean, they were literally screaming and cussing at me. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay. All right. They're not messing around. So yeah, I had to get my little booty in gear. I found out very quickly that they were there to get shit done, and I needed to be in alignment with that, or they were going to make stuff happen for me and get rid of me very quickly. So yeah,
And it
things are
isn't
different out in the field.
and it isn't going to be a pleasant meeting across a desk.
No, it's not how it's going to go down. A little employee discipline form's not going to be involved.
You know, if a white collar guy or woman is listening to this program today, what do you have to share with them and how they work with blue collar folks? You know, I've watched that show Undercover Boss a few times.
Yep.
You kind of see tremendous learning on the part of the boss who goes out and gets his hands dirty.
Yep.
How do we relate better to people that actually do the work?
Yeah, I love that question. And I think both parties have a lot to learn from each other. I think, you know, what we do in my core business, Evolution Mechanical, is I will take office people and have them go work in the field. And then I will take field people and have them come work in the office. So the talents, the training, the mindsets, the experiences, they're both required in order to have a successful business, obviously. But I think it's important for both people to respect each other, even though you might have come from different upbringings or different paths. And one person went to college and the other person didn't. They worked their way up in the field, but we have a lot to learn from each other. But I think someone needs to facilitate those relationships, because I don't think people will naturally just kind of interact. And I teach people and I coach, you know, people, like I said, within our organization to respect each other. And it doesn't matter where you came from. It matters where we're going together. And what can we learn from each other? What can white collar educated people teach our blue collar people in the field about business systems, structure, operations, leadership, communication, analytics, and stuff like that? And then what can our blue collar folks teach them about how things work in the field in terms of interacting better with customers and what it looks like to show up and make things happen logistically and mechanically and stuff like that. So I think it's awesome. I love both sides of the business, and I've sat on both sides of the bus for sure.
Well, that comes across in your voice and your facial expressions. You've got some passion about that.
Yeah, thank you.
That's great. You know, in our trainings over the years with over 1 million people, one of the exercises that we do early on the first day is to talk with people about how they avoid, including how they avoid training experiences that they just signed up for and paid for. But then they'll, we run our racket and we avoid. And years ago, it was always television or shopping or going for a run, different ways we avoid the present, whatever's happening presently. And of course, the thing that's avoided now, and probably like you, I turn it off for things like this, that this is our biggest way to avoid. And the thing that I get in talking with my clients is that they get kind of attached to their office and their desk and that phone and a computer and avoid getting out and just being with people, playing the cashier role across the counter, going out on a service call with an unhappy client. And you see that on that TV show, but I've also seen it with my work. When I had 70 trainers, I didn't do it. I did one training a year. A 5-day training, but I made sure I was in the back of the room 3 or 4 days every month with different trainers, so that I could see it live, not the report. See their struggles, see their wins, see the transformation. You'll see all of the good stuff.
Absolutely.
Also see some of the places where we could be better.
For sure.
And, that's incredibly valuable. Along the way, in building your current business or a previous one, have you had any major breakdowns, where you really had to go back to God? It's kind of my favorite expression, and increase my prayer frequency.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. So 20 years on the entrepreneurial journey. I thought for a while there that breakdowns and failure was like my middle name. It seemed like I had more issues and failures and problems than I did anything like really ever working right, and that's not really true. It's an emotional thing, right? There's a lot of times where things were working very well, but I learned now through my personal development to practice gratitude and give myself a lot more grace than I used to when I was younger and starting off on my journey. But yeah, it's been rags to riches. It's been up and down. It's a roller coaster ride. And I think that, for anyone that has a business or has been, working in a business as a leader or business owner, you probably know this. It's a roller coaster. But for people that don't understand this, or you're about to go into business for yourself, you have to realize like it's not going to be a straight line trajectory of going straight up the mountain. There's going to be peaks and valleys, peaks and valleys, peaks and valleys, all the way up. So after about 15 or 16 years of pain and suffering, I finally I finally realized like, okay, I need to go back to work for somebody, or I got to get some help here. Like, because this trial and error game and me thinking with my big fat ego that I got this figured out and I've got everything handled and everything's fine is not true. Like you said, the little racket, our little stories, you know what I mean? I finally had to get humble, and it took me enough pain to get to a place where I was like, okay, help, someone help, anybody help, God, Jesus, Buddha, whatever you can do, seminars, books. So my help or personal development, journey started about 2016, 2017. And it started with Vistage. Have you heard of Vistage? It's a peer advisory group.
Yes,
yeah, I'm sure you've had. So not to drag this out, but it started at Vistage. I joined Vistage, which was amazing. I got myself around some executives that knew that they were doing. I met an executive peak performance coach through Vistage. I hired Nikki, where I worked with him for 4 or 5 years. I had a one-to-one call with him, and I learned about the other white collar stuff that I had no idea about because I was a blue collar guy, right? So I learned that there was a whole bunch of stuff going on in an organization and in a business that I didn't have any skill set for. One of the biggest things was leadership and emotional intelligence. So I had to go down this, long journey of developing my EQ and my leadership skills and communication skills, and then all the business tactics and stuff like that. So it's been a journey, but I'm at a place now where I don't think I wouldn't say I've reached the mastery of success. I don't think you get there. I think it's a journey. There's no destination. I'm continuously evolving and developing and learning, but I had to get to a place where I became humble and self-aware to open up a door for growth and change, for me to actually learn what I was doing.
Oh, that's a tremendous commercial for your journey and what people might get from you in a coaching environment.
Yeah,
it's also like an endorsement of what I do, and it's appreciated.
Yeah,
big thing I think for many, particularly men. Women are a little more open to outside opinions than we are. Somehow, for most men, we think we're supposed to handle everything. It's also the key. I don't want to go too negative here, but the biggest demographic for suicide is, in fact, you and me. Adult men. We're the biggest. Women attempt it more often, but men succeed. That's why that demographic turns out that way. We're pretty result oriented, even with suicide. But that reaching out for help. It's the key to suicide education, but it's also the key to business success.
Right.
So that peer groups like Vistage and like what I do with my group coaching efforts, and having that one-on-one with someone who's been there before, who's seen a lot of the issues that are facing you and have some kind of skill in communicating in a transformative way where you actually shift your point of view.
Absolutely.
Incredible learning.
Yeah. What I learned too is that there's really a lot more personal development work to do in building a business as a leader than there is systems and strategies. Don't get me wrong. The systems, strategies, the operating systems, if you will, are absolutely important and mandatory to scale a business. But every leader has what I call like a ceiling or a Peter principle, if you will. And once we install some of the systems and tactics, And this is another big pill to swallow in terms of men and our ego and asking for help, right? When you have to look in the mirror and go, oh, I'm I'm the problem. I remember one of the I remember one of the, you know, the first series of conversations I started having with my coach, and he was just being a good coach, asking me questions, right, about this or about that, and how's this working and what's not working. And I had this laundry list of how everybody else was a problem, my customers, my people, my vendors, my whatever, right? And he goes, so I'm looking through this list, and it's a very comprehensive list, but I see one big problem with the list. And I go, what is it? What's missing? And he goes, are you sure you're ready to go down this journey of personal development and change? And I'm like, absolutely, no more pain for me. He goes, so the biggest thing that I see missing on this list is I don't see your name. And I was like, well, what are you talking about? He's like, so I don't see Matt Murray on this list. And I'm like, huh? Well, he's fine. We don't need to talk about him. So anyways, you probably know where this goes from here, right? How that story and how that 5 or 6 years of personal development work went after that. So yeah, it's a journey, and it's scary. It's scary for you to have to look inward, right? We're not really taught that in our today's society. I think maybe some people are, maybe some people are raised with an entrepreneur father or coach or whatever, but I think the majority or the masses, we don't know. We're not taught to look inward. We're not taught to how to give each other feedback and take feedback and constructive criticism. So yeah,
and not all of us had Jordan Peterson or Brian Tracy as a parent.
Yeah, exactly. Yep, 100%.
But you know, I so identify with that journey personally. I remember that first personal development course that I took, Mind Dynamics, they talked about personal responsibility.
Yeah.
And it, you know, it sounds like a cliche all these years later, but it changed my life for the better.
100%.
One of the things I realized is that I had a really challenging relationship with my mother. She was angry and violent, and you know, we were on the wrong side of the tracks in terms of economically. And my father had an affection for alcohol that didn't serve our family well. So it wasn't a good situation. So I had a lot of ways to blame them for my problems.
For sure.
You know, and I get in this seminar and I realize that my mother was one of the most responsible people on the planet. She was widowed 3 times. She kept, you know, they weren't nice clothing, but she kept clothing on our backs.
Yeah, exactly.
She kept us fed. She worked hard. Yeah, we could count on her. I don't recall her ever telling a lie or even shading the truth a little bit.
Yeah.
But it took that third party, that training, and then some coaching directly for me to really get that the moment I got personal responsibility, I got my power back.
Yes. Isn't that an amazing, it's a very scary thing to step your toe into that river of ownership and accountability. But boy, once you swim across to the other side and you get on the levee on the other side, wow, how amazing does that feel?
Oh, well said. Well said. Well, look, I mentioned earlier about that you and your wife had been in Colorado for a couples retreat.
Yeah.
What motivated that for you, and when did it happen?
Yeah, for sure. So when I started doing the personal development work, I got a coach and started going to seminars and started reading books and this and that. And eventually, at first, the wife was like, whatever, you know what I mean? He's doing all this stuff, going here, spending all this money, not seeing change, you know, because she sees money go out the door and wants immediate change, and it doesn't happen like that. So what happened eventually was I kept on that journey, and eventually she started to see change. She started to see me evolving and becoming a different person and thinking differently and showing up differently, taking more accountability and responsibility, being more truthful and more real with myself and with her and with the family. And that got her interested to come on the journey with me. Like, well, how do I play too? Right. Like, she was now interested. So our church, a gentleman named Keith Kraft that runs Elevate Life Church out of Frisco, Texas, out of Dallas area, He's not only a pastor, but he's an entrepreneur. He's actually an entrepreneur and business coach before he started the church 20 years ago. But he runs a couples group. He runs a couples mastermind. And when I had found out about that couples mastermind, I was like, wow, this is amazing. A husband and wife mastermind where we can go together as a couple and we can go and learn, and we do a day of learning, and then we do a day of activities and having fun together. So it's been an amazing journey. We've been doing that for a couple of years now, and it's been very, very powerful for our relationship, for our children, for our business, and for our journey. So we both love it now. We're both kind of on the path, if you will, of doing things to become better people continuously.
You had been engaged in a lot of personal growth before you made that decision. When you introduced it to your wife, did she immediately jump in and say, yeah, let's do this? Or was there some hesitancy?
No, at first it was like how my wife, she's very smart, smarter than me, and she wanted more information. Like what's it look? She was definitely interested, but she said, I'm the kind of guy, I'm like, okay, whatever, let's go that way, jump off the cliff, we'll build wings on the way down. She's more intelligent. She's like, okay, that I like the idea of that, but what are the logistics? What's it cost? How's this going to work? When are we going to meet? How often? Right. So she did her little due diligence, if you will. And then she's like, okay, yep, I like it. How do we sign up? So that's kind of how it went. That's kind of how it went down. And she knew of the pastor too. So she trusted Keith and stuff like that. So she did her check the boxes kind of thing. And then we signed up, and the rest is history. So it's been good.
I think doing anything together as marriages mature is incredibly important.
Absolutely.
When you're just focused on the kids and the house and the job and that kind of stuff, they provide a vision for both of you individually, but not a vision for you as a couple. And one of the things I've learned from my coach is that you need to have that in corporate setting. They call it a third thing. That when you bring two companies together, there has to be a third vision for the combined company. And for what I've observed with clients, with myself, is you need to have things to do together and to be together. And sometimes that's a sport. Sometimes that's you both golf, or you both like going to football games, or you both. One of my dear friends in Japan years ago, after retirement, he and his wife, and I have no idea how they decided this, they decided to study the world's religions by going to those places and to places of worship.
Wow, so I love that.
They went to these grand Catholic churches, but they also went to Greek Orthodox, which are quite relatively simple, and they went to Muslim places of worship, and then that meant that they had to learn a little bit of English, or not English, of the language of the country where they were traveling to.
Sure.
And so they would spend all year long studying the language, studying the history, studying the culture, and then take the trip, and then sharing it with people around them. And I was one of the lucky people to be included in that. And it was a classic. Japan at that time, years ago, was exclusively an introduction wedding structure. You didn't fall in love and our normal Western routine. Right. Your parents shopped for you and identified a good mate. And one of the interesting things that came out of that relationship I just talked about is they took a trip to Europe to see some church. And when they came back, he hand wrote the most charming and beautiful letter, one of the best I've ever received, where he said, I realized during this trip that even though I had this arranged marriage, I have fallen in love with my wife. For a Japanese executive to say that.
Yes.
And it was just, like right in the heart.
Right in the heart. Yep. I love that. And that takes that takes massive work, that fall in love, the honeymoon phases, that's easy. That just happens by default. And like what you said, I love this idea of this third entity thing that we need to be co-creating and working on. And that's our relationship. And Heather and I, we got married in 2010. We started dating in 2006, and things kind of worked by default for a while. But then we grew apart. And if you're not, what we learn, and a lot of this had to do with the work we're doing in our couples mastermind, if you're not actively continuously working on your marriage relationship, it will fall apart. So we still date each other now. We still we're working on leaving love notes, and we leave notes on the mirror and the little stuff like this, stuff you would do when you're in that high hormone honeymoon phase. You got to keep that stuff going if you want to keep the magic going, right? If not, the relationship's going backwards. So it all takes work. All of it does.
Wise counsel for anyone that's caring about their relationship, or any relationship for that matter.
Yep. Date your spouse for sure.
Hey, Matt, this has been a delight. First of all, just sincere thanks. I know that you've shared a lot that my audience will profit from and enjoy and get untold benefits. If people want to get in touch with you, either about your coaching or about the couples workshop, the mastermind, how do people reach you?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks. So the easiest way to do is go to my website, bluecollarking.com. And then if you would like to ask me any, questions, or you want to text me, or if you'd like to get a free copy of my new book just dropped about a month ago, you can go to Instagram and at the real Blue Collar King. That's my handle. You can jump on there and shoot me a private message, and I'd love to answer any questions. I love helping people. I love sharing, and I love sharing my journey. I love answering questions. So don't be shy.
That's great. We'll also put it in the show notes. And Matt, once again, thank you. This has been a delight.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us for Conversations with Achievers. If you or someone you know would make a good guest for this weekly show, the details are at therobertwhite.com and click on podcasts. I'm looking for businessmen and women with a story to tell, stories that might benefit other owners and executives. If you got some value from this program, I'd really appreciate you sharing about it on social media, and just mentioned www.therobertwhite.com. Of course, subscribing means you won't miss a show, and rating the podcast positively will leave Robert smiling. I'm building a movement here for leaders who want to succeed in business, succeed with their families, have fun, and contribute toward making the world a better place. It's special to me that you chose to listen. I look forward to connecting again next week. Remember, reach out to me anytime with any questions or concerns at therobertwhite.com. Bye for now.